Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to our military family across the globe. On behalf of the National Military Family Association's Board of Governors and staff, thank you for being together with us. I'm Ashish Vazirani. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of NMFA. I'm humbled, blessed, and grateful to be a part of NMFA as we move into our next 50 years of service to military families. Several years ago, I attended this event in a hotel with a lot of other people. This is my first leadership event as a member of the NMFA family. Normally, at these events, we network, hear from speakers, and then we consider what we as organizations, individuals, and as leaders need to do to ensure military families are empowered, resilient, and thriving. While I'd love to be with you all in person, there is an upside to having a virtual event. We were able to make it more inclusive, accessible to both military families and supporters. A true state of the military family, where you get to hear directly from leaders in the space, advocates for families, and from military families themselves. I've had the privilege of meeting many of you, but not all of you. So I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about my military family. I'm the son of a Marine, a Vietnam vet who lost his sight in the war. I'm the son of a caregiver who raised 5 children and had her own very successful career. I grew up around veterans, many of them wounded warriors who also advocated for military families. I'm a Navy veteran. Serving shaped my professional career, even after I left active service. While I was in the service, I deployed several times. So I know a bit about the joys and stress of military life as a service member. This year, my wife Deborah and I will experience those joys and stresses in a different way, as parents whose son is deploying for the first time. Our Marine deployed just a few days ago. We're excited for him, but this will be our first Christmas apart. I want to give a big shout out to all families who have a service member deployed or are on extended temporary duty orders. It's a time of great uncertainty. A particular shout out to the families of the Thundering 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. That's my military family story, and each of you have your own. I'm just a little piece of a very big puzzle. We are one team and one family. We stand with you as military family members, and we know together we're stronger. The National Military Family Association is a military family. Every single person who works here has a personal connection to the military community. Now, I'm excited to introduce my colleague, Bessa Pinchatti, who will serve as our Master of Ceremonies. Bessa is also part of the Marine Corps family, but was warned, never marry a Marine. Bessa, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you all heard everything that Ash was saying. He was talking about the advice that I got to never marry a Marine, and we all know all advice isn't necessarily good advice. So here I am 16 years later after marrying that Marine. I'm so excited to be your Master of Ceremonies today, and we have such a wonderful program. We have spouses of top military leaders. We have our amazing keynotes, General and Mrs. Milley. We also have military family panels moderated by 2 of the best in the biz. So it's going to be an amazing program. Military families are strong, but we absolutely can't do it alone. So thank all of you, everyone tuned in today, for making the work that we do for military families possible. I want to say hello to some special guests that I see are joining us today. Maria McConville, spouse of the Chief of Staff of the Army. Molly Raymond, spouse of the Chief of Space Operations of the Space Force. Dawn Schultz, spouse of the Commandant of the Coast Guard. Ellen Dunford, military spouse extraordinaire. She's, of course, married to former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford. Robert Bianchi, CEO of the Navy Exchange. And I'd also like to welcome all of our Board of Governors and Board of Advisors, members of NMFA. We could not do this work without you. And also I'd like to send a special hello, shout out, and welcome to Joyce Razor, who spent more than 2 decades here at NMFA and continues to inspire us each and every day. Our 50th anniversary sponsor, PenFed Credit Union is who made this entire event possible. We want to thank you so much. We've had a great year. In fact, we've had many great years together. Let's get into the program. NMFA is thrilled to be hosting today's State of the Military Family because military families have been our focus for 50 years. Let's take a look at some of the work that we do. Being in the military is tough. You're dealing with deployments, your family's moving every 2 to 3 years, and sometimes you're dealing with a service member's injury. And it's not just the service member who's affected, it's every member of the military family.
The National Military Family Association is the leading advocacy organization for military families through all stages of military life. The organization also provides programs and services that fill gaps where policy and legislation end.
When a family is well supported, the service member can focus on the mission at hand.
Together, we're stronger.
Together, we're stronger.
Together, we're stronger.
Together, we are stronger.
At NMFA, we know that together we are stronger. Serving and supporting our military families makes our country stronger too. And of course, that starts at home. Sharene Brown grew up in a military family and then married into one in 1989. She recently made her 20th military move right here back to DC. She's a mom, she's an advocate. She also married the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. She's married to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General C.Q. Brown, the first Black military service chief. Join me in welcoming Sharene.
Greetings and hello. Thank you for the warm introduction, and I am delighted to be here with you today. My name is Sharene Brown, and I am the spouse of General C.Q. Brown, Jr., Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Unfortunately, I am not able to join you for this live virtual event, but I am happy to be here via our next best practice, a recording, and grateful to the National Military Family Association for their inclusion. 2020 has changed all of us in unique ways and continues to adjust how we approach life. For our military members, the mission remains ever present. We support our families in many creative ways, remaining flexible and resilient, all while managing our own objectives and those of our family. As strong, versatile, and determined as we are when faced with change, this pandemic has added stressors and impacts that have affected so many of us. Not surprisingly, the location of our military families, along with the availability of support, has contributed to these challenges in different ways. When COVID became a reality for me, I was living overseas and the pandemic arrived at 2 separate instances. Our military families in Japan and Korea were dealing with COVID well before its presence and realization in the U.S. By mid-February, our Oconus military families were experiencing restricted community movement, canceled sports programs, school closures, and Facebook Live town halls to stay informed and receive guidelines to keep safe. Our command teams were navigating this new health crisis for our airmen and families. Listening was the most supportive resource I could provide. The guidance and adjustments made by our military leadership to protect and support our community was unique to each location and host country. The second instance hit closer to home and happened in late March with the increasing number of COVID contractions and loss of life in the U.S. It was as if I was watching a movie in slow motion. From my own experience to the stories of the families, friends, and neighbors, the impacts felt were especially personal from the perspective of a military spouse, parent, an EFMP family, a friend, a child of aging parents, and a person of color. Some of the stories included hearing the sorrow and pain of a friend whose father caught COVID, was in the hospital fighting for his life, and a friend who was unable to travel to be present with him when told he would not have long before succumbing to the virus. The concern for my own adult son, whose community was a hotspot and was not able to telework, and I kept reminding him ad nauseum, as mothers do, take precautions on a daily basis. Listening to high school seniors' high hopes of a possible college athletic scholarship fade away when the state swim championship meet was canceled. The worrisome heart for my son, who described his sentiments after the death of George Floyd while dealing with the pandemic. A friend's loss of a managerial position due to the drastic decline in the hospitality industry. Friends describing the mental and social health of a newly PCS member participating in virtual learning without having met anyone at their school or even in their neighborhood due to isolation requirements. Each of us are able to share our own stories of how this pandemic has affected us. The mental, physical, and emotional stress bears a tremendous weight. Families have economic concerns about the lasting effects of the pandemic and the ongoing issues they can expect to contend with as we move into 2021. It's ironic that to keep us safe from COVID, health experts outline strong guidelines to social distance. However, when crises occurs, we tend to come together physically, socially, and emotionally to work through issues and solve problems. General Brown often shares a quote that states, "Success takes help. Failure you can do alone." Two concepts stand out in this quote. First, success is what we define it to be. Some days, success is making it to the end of the day. At other times, it can be finding childcare for working parents, or perhaps ensuring our children are learning with this new educational approach. Second, asking or receiving assistance and support is only natural, at times wise, and even required. Managing difficult times while taking care of our families and ourselves can mask the change that may be happening within us. The overlooked and unforeseen effects can impact our health, our relationships, and our families. Stress, in the positive or negative form, is still stress. Finding ways to manage it by setting boundaries is an avenue to protecting ourselves. Examples are to get up and get moving, go for a short walk, express your feelings respectfully, even if uncomfortable, minimize time on social media, practice deep breathing, take an online yoga class, and ask for help. Bottom line, take care of yourself first, then help others. Recalling the flight attendant safety brief, remember to put on the mask yourself first before assisting others. You'll be better able to manage. As we navigate and work through COVID-19 and beyond, we will continue to find new ways to be successful. When situations escalate and require more support, let your voice, your perspective, and your recommended solution be heard. CQ and I have watched the Air Force and its people continue to evolve, get better, and break barriers every day. We believe the multiple perspectives we have in the military culture drives our history of success and will continue to build a more resilient and formidable force. Our thanks to National Military Family Association for their caring leadership, understanding of sacrifices and demands of service, and their advocacy for our military members and their families for over 50 years. National Military Family Association understands that advancing our quality of life and quality of experiences directly impacts our national security. Thank you.
Sharene is very invested in military spouse employment. And in fact, she worked with our good friends at Hiring Our Heroes, whose professional network has helped thousands of military spouses succeed professionally. But many are still struggling. Jen Davis, an Air Force veteran and military family advocate, and my colleague here at NMFA, fights for policies that support military spouse employment. Jen?
Thank you, Bessa. Like Bessa said, my name is Jen Davis, and I'm a Deputy Director of Government Relations at the NMFA. I'm also a military spouse. Like most of you, navigating the pandemic has been hard on my family. It's been particularly hard since my husband has been overseas for the last 4 years. While he's been gone, I've been the only parent here caring for our son. And I've been working full-time, thankfully working full-time. Navigating kids and work isn't easy for anyone, but it's particularly hard for military spouses trying to get a job. Before the pandemic started, military spouses experienced a 24% unemployment rate, and we know that number has only gotten worse. Combine that with what's become a crisis in childcare for military families, and the hope that you might actually get the job that you want and be able to keep it seems increasingly out of reach. That's why I'm excited about this upcoming panel. All 4 of the women you'll meet have found a career, some even a dream job, and have made it work through all sorts of challenges. And here to guide the conversation is award-winning national reporter Leo Shane from Military Times. Welcome, Leo.
Jennifer, thanks for that introduction, and thank you to NMFA for hosting this panel and for the invitation to be part of this conversation. We've got a great panel, as Jennifer said, of military spouses who've seen both the bad and the good of the pandemic, and some of the challenges, but also some of the advantages that some of the work from home and quarantine things have presented. So you guys don't want to hear from me; you guys want to hear from them. So let me throw it right to them to introduce themselves a little bit. And to talk about some of the changes they've seen, some of the challenges of the past 9 months. So let's start with Libby Jamison, who's an attorney over at Department of Veterans Affairs and Military Response. Libby, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about where you've been.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much to NMFA for convening this discussion and for having us today. Like Leo said, I am an attorney for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'll give my legal disclaimer up top that I'm here in my speaking as myself today, not on behalf of VA. But I have been really fortunate to find an employer that has allowed remote work and has been flexible even pre-pandemic. I worked from San Diego remotely, although our headquarters was here in DC. So feel very fortunate to have a supportive employer that has allowed me to have that dream job and take it with me. But I would say, I think there's no question in my mind that the pandemic has made things harder for military families. We are currently geo-batching. So my husband is in San Diego. He's attached to the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which probably a lot of you saw in the news over the last year. And so that was a really tough time for families, especially, we're scattered around the country. I'm not the only one geo-batching. And even for the folks in San Diego, working through something that difficult, like what was happening on the Roosevelt when we couldn't come together in person like we are so used to as a community, was difficult. And it was difficult geo-batching. We had plans to fly around and meet each other all the time. And obviously that wasn't happening. We've only seen each other twice since Christmas last year. So I know we're going to talk some more about some licensing and employment issues. And I'm excited to dive into that conversation.
Great, thanks so much, and yeah, we'll get back into those issues. But first, let me throw it over to Captain Biggs. Captain Biggs, who you've got the experience not just as military spouse, but a military member, an active duty nurse with the Air Force. So, talk to us about what the pandemic has been like for you and what challenges you've had.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be a part of this panel today. I also have to give a legal disclaimer that the views that are presented and the things that I say are mine. I'm not here in any official capacity. Everything that I say is my views and not necessarily those of the DoD or the Air Force. So with that being said, so I'm a nurse. I have been in the military for 12 years. Started out enlisted, so I know those struggles too. And I moved over to the dark side, they say, 4 years ago. So I've been working as a nurse in Ohio. I've been married for 7 years to my wonderful husband, who is a law enforcement officer. So that presents its own challenges. A nurse married to a cop and, both being essential workers. we have 2 kiddos. One is 7 and one is 2. So we have gone through the school closures and the trying to figure out childcare in that aspect, as well as having another kiddo who needs full-time childcare, who also has special needs. So, the pandemic, we've thankfully been working the whole time, being essential workers. But I will say the one thing that has been challenging for us, and I know a lot of other families, is childcare specifically. So we chose to kind of step away and do something different just prior to the pandemic. So we ended up moving away from what would be considered traditional childcare, using on-base services, or even family childcare providers. And we chose to use an au pair, which is essentially a live-in nanny. But shifting to that side of it has given us the opportunity to go to work every day, to complete the mission, and not have to worry so much. When schools closed down, my son was able to just stay at home with her and continue it and not really skip a beat. But yeah, childcare, especially right now, it's very difficult. So that's one of the things that has affected us.
All right, great, thanks. And we will get back to the childcare. We've already got a couple of questions from the audience on that. But first, let me throw it over to Latorial Faison, another military spouse and a fellow writer, although I think you get to have a little bit more fun with your writing than I get to have with mine. My editors don't like it when I use colorful language in my story. So, Latorial, give us a little bit of a breakdown of how things have been going for you.
Thanks, Leo. I am a military spouse of 25 years. And so the climb to get to where I am right now has probably been the most challenging. Over the 25 years, we've moved 8 times. I've had 16 different jobs, 5 full-time jobs, 11 part-times. And so basically the challenge has been to reestablish kids at every move, and as a spouse, sort of reinvent myself. Currently, our current situation is that we are all quarantined at home, or working remotely, not quarantined. It's not been really challenging for us because most of us have been working remotely. One of the major challenges that we face is that 3 of our sons are 20. We have 2 sons that are 21 right now, one will be 22 soon, and we have a 12-year-old. So it's kind of challenging to work remotely and deal with pandemic with the age group that wants to be out and about and not really understanding the seriousness of it all. I think probably the most anxious I was at the onset of the pandemic. I teach on the faculty at a university. And so, just being stressed about whether or not I was going to have to be in the classroom, whether or not my kid was going to have to be in the classroom in a middle school, that was probably my biggest challenge. For me, worrying about the pandemic has been about spreading it, not knowing that you're spreading it. People who walk around asymptomatic. We are currently living about an hour from our immediate family. So probably another stressor for us has been, when you're military and you get to a new duty station, you don't know a lot of people. So you're kind of learning people as you go. And by the time you leave, you know them. But we're back in Virginia where we know a lot of people. And it has been really stressful hearing of all the people who we know who are testing positive, getting sick, losing family members. We've lost we've lost several people in the hometown where we grew up. So just daily getting the news for us and not knowing how soon we're going to be able to get back to work, or, how soon they're going to bring kids back to school in this pandemic. That's been most of the challenge for our family. Just the worry of it all.
Great, thanks. And let me throw it last but not least to Caprice James. Caprice, talk about how things have changed, but also you've got a slightly different background with some of the nonprofit work you've done and some of the humanitarian work. So talk about just how that translates into the same sort of employment issues and transition issues that you got a challenge with.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. Like they said, my name is Caprice James. I actually run a international nonprofit called Stella's Girls. So my nonprofit work and humanitarian work is around the globe. For us, for the pandemic, actually pre-COVID, I had no children. During COVID, I ended up with 2 children. I ended up with a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old. So at the beginning of COVID, the 5-year-old came to us and we had to homeschool. And luckily for us at the time, my husband was home and he did a lot of the homeschooling because running a nonprofit, we run into the fire. You don't run away from the fire when something is happening. And so having him home was great. And then, of course, going into the summer. However, now with back, in the fall, husband is back at work and in the Pentagon and is essential in the Pentagon. The little one, actually, her school has been open. So she has been in school. But then the 15-year-old that came to us, her school was not. And so working through that virtually. For me personally, I have been extremely busy during COVID, just because I do manage teams across West Africa and East Africa. So watching the pandemic also hit them at the same time and us still trying to provide services to the young girls and women that we work with, and several different crises that's happened in their countries, and then being located in Southern Maryland, also taking interest and supporting a lot of our low income and homeless families. So a lot of my time has been out in the community and providing food or providing school resources, because a lot of the families were not able to get them with so many people not being at work anymore. And a lot of the families where I live, with it being a very rural area, they lost their jobs. So I have been on the ground, extremely busy with that. And I've been lucky for the schools being open. Otherwise, like many other military spouses, it may have been extremely hard for me to be out in the community and trying to really focus on, little ones at home. So that's been a real blessing for me. But we have lost several friends when the pandemic started. I think we lost about 10 friends back to back. We've lost about 2 family members. So that space has been a little bit hard, but also just trying to continue to move forward. So our experience has kind of been up and down during the pandemic.
So let me play off that right away, because again, this issue of childcare, the issue of schools has been a major one, not just in the military community, but in America right now. But when you all are dealing with the challenges of military life, the challenges of trying to deal, Libby, this idea that your husband's halfway across the world here, or at least across the country, and you've got a hand tied behind your back while you're doing all of this. I know from all of my reporting and from all my conversations that military spouses are very resilient and are good with rolling with the punches here, but this is a pretty big punch, and I'm seeing in a lot of the questions from the audience, what are resources, what are ways to deal with the child care issues? What are ways to deal with just this latest upheaval? Do you have resources? Do you have community connections? How, if a spouse comes to you and says, I don't know what to do at this point, what is each of your advice on that?
I'll say, especially depending on where you as a spouse are located, nowadays, most military families live in the local community. It's very important to connect with the local community. What has been helpful, especially in the nonprofit space, and since a lot of nonprofits are essential, many of them are working with each other when it comes to childcare. So, and a lot of military spouses volunteer their time. So really connecting and reaching out to those organizations that may have some, childcare space. That's what we've seen here in the Southern Maryland area. It's working and connecting with each other at those local daycares and not necessarily on the base, because some of the bases you can go on to, some it's not. We already know childcare is, the installations are already filled. But really going into the local community, because most youth centers, the Boys and Girls Clubs have been open. They've been open since the pandemic. The YMCA is another place that's been open. So they are providing, those are just a few of the 2 organizations that are usually in most communities that the individuals can go to.
And Captain Biggs, you were talking before about your childcare issues. I mean, what has been the solution that you've found, or the partial solutions at least?
Right. So we, like I said, we went the more non-traditional route in actually bringing an au pair over here from Colombia. I felt like that was really our only option. Being shift workers, you're required to be at work before daycare is open, and you are there past the time when daycare is closed. And then you're stuck finding someone to take your children at 5 a.m., transport them to daycares, and then someone to pick them up when daycare's closed, take them back to your home, every other weekend care and that kind of stuff. And so we went with the au pair program. She lives with us, she's there full time, but thankfully we've also had neighbors reach out to us and say, hey, when you need help, let us know. Thankfully, I live in a community where a lot of my neighbors are older and retired, and they've got their grandkids who conveniently go to school with my son. And so they have reached out to us. But yeah, it's been a lot of unconventional routes, mainly to cover shift workers, because that's what we have the biggest issue with, those people who don't have quote unquote a 9-to-5 position. I think that's where a lot of families are struggling right now. A lot of the traditional daycare centers, on base and off base, they're cutting down their hours as well. So they're only staying open the hours that are most needed, which is 7 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. And even that doesn't cover the spread for a lot of these shift workers, nurses, cops. Our shifts are just so long. So that's been the biggest challenge, but really, reaching out to those around you. And then, like I said, our non-conventional route that we went.
Okay. Let me bring in our silent sixth panelist here, Nicole from NMFA, because you're sending me some notes here about some assistance programs that the association has, and I think that's important information to put out here. So go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leo. I think Caprice and Rebecca brought up some really good points, especially on the childcare front, in terms of accessibility issues. Not all CDCs on base are open right now because of COVID, and many of them are restricted to only essential personnel. In October, NMFA launched a childcare fee relief reimbursement program. We were inundated with nearly 10,000 applications within our 2-week application window, which just goes to show that there's such a great need for childcare affordability assistance, financial relief for childcare among our military families. So we were able to assist over 400 children, nearly about 225 families through that reimbursement program just this month. And the aid societies of all the services are also offering some financial assistance as well in this environment where a lot of families were not expecting their children to be at home learning remotely. So that is one area that NMFA has really jumped on to try to fill that void that's missing for our families. On the legislative and policy front, I am the Deputy Director of Government Relations, and our government relations team has been working on several proposals that we will continue to work on into the next Congress that begins in January to help alleviate some of the challenges that our families are facing due to the childcare crisis in this country. Some of those proposals include the DoD using innovative solutions such as public-private partnerships with private daycare centers off base to increase capacity for our military service members. Because when it comes down to it, the lack of childcare, the lack of affordable childcare is a military readiness issue. Hard stop. We'd also like to see dependent care flexible spending accounts be established for our service members. Federal employees have access to these, our service members don't, and we just want to see parity. We'd also like to see an increase to the services fee assistance programs for childcare. That program is administered by Child Care Aware, of America, but the services fund those programs. So if they can increase that funding, put more priority on that, it'll really help alleviate some of these issues that our families are facing.
Great. Thanks for the background on that. Let me shift gears real quick because I am seeing a handful of questions I want to get to. Siobhan Gibson has sent a question saying, my military family has been my life and my career thus far. If I want to find a job or a new career and want to start now, but I don't know what to do, where do I start? Libby, let me throw that to you. And we've also gotten a couple of questions related to specifically mil-spouse lawyers and how to continue a career there. So let's start with you. What advice would you give to someone who's starting out in the field right now, who's in that position?
Yeah, well, I think there's just such a wealth of employment resources, which was not necessarily the case before we had great advocates like NMFA really pushing on these issues. So we're fortunate to have some fantastic resources, starting with NMFA. I know they have a great scholarship that will help with education and certification costs. So if you are either starting a career or shifting paths and going back for education and certification, I know it covers even more than that. There's a lot that it helps out with, but I would check that out. And the other really fantastic resource is Military OneSource. So through DoD, again, a wealth of resources, but including you can get a free one-on-one career coach through Military OneSource, who will help you think through, what is the right career path for me? Does it make sense to go back and get additional education? I know military spouses, when we can't find something else to do, a lot of times we're going back and getting all these degrees. Does that make sense? What certification is right for me? So would definitely recommend Military OneSource. And for military spouse attorneys, I would suggest Military Spouse JD Network. So that's an organization I worked with before, and it's a bar association, and military spouses married to the military come together and we can commiserate about having to take the bar exam over and over again. But more importantly, we've banded together to work on reducing some of those licensing barriers. And I know there's other specialty groups as well. Military spouses in STEM, there's a military spouse behavioral health clinicians group. NMFA runs Facebook groups for military spouse nurses and teachers. So I think we were talking about it in the green room before, but the military spouse mafia, as we call it, is always a fantastic resource. If you can find your tribe and plug in, when I was lawyering and PCSing for the first time, I had friends who were military spouses and they understood why PCSing sucked. and then I had lawyer friends who were like, oh my gosh, you're going to take a bar exam again? Like, what are you doing? But it wasn't until I found that military spouse attorney tribe where people kind of understood the intersection of my military spouse life and the legal career that I really was able to get, professional help figuring out how I'm going to get licensed. Am I going to take a bar exam again? If I don't work, is my career going to survive? How am I going to re-enter? And also personal, just people helping me through really, difficult times when my husband's gone and I think my legal career is over, grabbing that glass of wine and walking me back. So I think the military spouse mafia can be a really great career resource as well as a personal support.
Great. LaTora, let me throw it over to you, not just for the general idea, but we've got a couple of questions related to both the arts and education. How does a military spouse get started there?
Wow. Well, I've always been a writer since I was a kid, but oddly enough, the military life is what has pretty much made me a poet today. I was that person who went to college. I thought that when I graduated, I was going to use those degrees and not stay home. I was so against being a stay-at-home mom in the early stages of this. But one military move with one toddler and another one on the way landed us in Charlotte, North Carolina, where there was no base. There was no military. There were no military resources. And so because of how much childcare was, I decided to stay home and keep our kids. And that pushed me actually into the writing. Thank God for the internet, because I began networking with writers online and poets online. Initially, I created my own nationally read poetry site. And it was at that duty station that I created my own small press and published my first book. And the rest is kind of history. When you're into writing and you start publishing, then you start also speaking or getting out and doing readings and book signings, things of that nature. So the arts in terms of creative writing have always been important to me. I think what really took me over the top was we left Charlotte, North Carolina, and headed to Fort Hood. This was after 9/11. 9/11 was a critical time for military families. So, it just created that unity for people to gather together. And I found a group of writers who were writing in terms of putting down the experience of having our nation go to war. And here I was, this young military spouse in my 20s. Husband was going to war, and he actually went to Iraq and served with the 4th ID. There I spearheaded the battalion family readiness group. And my writing actually started being used there, sharing it with families, doing newsletters. And there I actually wrote about a number of the experiences that I was having as a military spouse: poetry, creative nonfiction. I had my first piece published in a collection of essays at that point that the book went on to receive an NAACP Image Award. So just writing it's a slow pace, but definitely stick to it. I've been able to use writing in such a way that it's not only been therapeutic and helpful for me, but I've also been able to, venture out and take it into schools and do something a little bit more meaningful with it. Speak to young people, community organizations, and groups. I think every base that we've been on, including South Korea, I put on some sort of poetry reading, carried it into schools. And I would like to speak to the spouses in terms of the question that was previously asked about what types of jobs I could do. I would like to say to any spouse out there who is sitting on a master's degree, if you're sitting on a master's degree, I encourage you to, wherever you go, find the community college, find the higher ed piece, because you may be able to do some adjunct work. Whatever your master's degree is in, and whatever you have 18 graduate hours in, you're able to teach. So being able to adjunct for, everywhere we went was a saving grace for me, but it also allowed me to network with professionals and writers. So the arts were very important to me. I was an English major. I'm just an artsy kind of person. And when I find other poets, I just get ecstatic, because it's something about poets. They're like no other. When you find someone who's an English major or who's a poet, you get really excited. I would like to say also living abroad. We lived in Korea for 2 years. You would think that living abroad would really take you out of your element and allow you not to be able to operate in the gifts and talents that you have. But actually, it was in Korea that I had even more things published. I wrote 2 more books there. I became a correspondence writer for the military paper Stars and Stripes. So constantly look for opportunities. Don't be afraid to put the things that you do out there. I know that there's military spouses are very resilient, very diverse. A lot of times we focus on our kids and our spouses, but one of my goals as a spouse has been to never leave myself behind. I did not like being a stay-at-home mom, but now I've come to love it, because I see how it's allowed me to be there for my children. But at the same time, I've also been able to grow and to cultivate this writer life that I have. And I really have to attribute that to the military, because I cannot say that I would be anybody's poet if I had not been a military spouse first.
Great. Thanks for that. Caprice and Rebecca, we've got just a minute left here. Caprice, can I get just quick from you on nonprofit world? Do folks just start off by volunteering? What's the way to get into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think spouses are already great volunteers in their community. That's how I started and really gained a lot of my experience being a nonprofit kind of executive and to my own, being a nonprofit leader. But yeah, just go and find what you're passionate about. And especially during this space, nonprofits, we are looking for volunteers. And for me, I'm always looking for military spouses that want to engage and want to give back. And I'll say like Latoria, in Japan, man, that's where I really started, being in the community and pulling more military spouses. So if you don't have a job now, you're looking for something to do, please go and volunteer and be strategic about volunteering. That's a key thing. You can't volunteer everywhere, but you have to be a strategic volunteer.
Great. And Rebecca, last thoughts from you?
Yeah, the childcare piece, it's tough to navigate. But one thing, because I know that we have military members and spouses watching, I would say, don't ever feel like you have to make the choice of my career or yours. And that's something that has come up in our family a lot with recent moves. I just got orders. And so the question is, am I going to stay in, or are you going to keep your career as a police officer? So I would say, on the childcare front, don't let that be a reason that one of you ends your career. That's my biggest thing. Find ways to fight through it. Do your research. There are other avenues out there. There's Facebook groups, support groups out there. Everybody's got an idea, and a lot of people want to help. So, just stay focused and don't feel like you have to choose. So.
All right, great. Well, listen, I've got about 3 hours more worth of questions for all of you, but NMFA is telling me I will not be able to ask all of them here. So let's end it there. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass some of the leftover questions to the next panel because I know there's still some more great conversation, but appreciate all of your insight. And again, appreciate NMFA for hosting all of us here.
Hey everyone, I absolutely love being a part of this military spouse mafia. So how inspiring was that conversation? Loved listening to it. I was taking notes as we went along, just fighting through and making things happen. That's what I love about this community and the way that we all support each other. And I want to talk now about our next guest. She is a retired sergeant major from the Marine Corps. And what do you do after 21 years in the Marine Corps? Most people not this, but this woman went to pastry school at the Art Institute of California and became a cake artist because that's her dream. This amazing woman is also married to a guy who's a pretty big deal. He's the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, Troy E. Black. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, my name's Stacy Black. I'm a retired first sergeant, and I served 21 years. My experience as a military spouse has been it's never been the same from year to year. It just depends on the unit that my husband gets sent to, the amount of commitment or involvement that it is. A couple of his units, there's not been a whole lot of Marines. It's been more of a small unit. So therefore the involvement definitely takes a different direction. And then we've been in units where I'm heavily involved with the command team and just doing everything I can to be a part of that. As an active duty Marine, I could only be involved in his unit's things so much, just because I still had my billet and my commitments with my own unit. So that one, I think it took me a little bit of time, but with the help of the commanding officer spouse, she was very personable and wanted to know me on a personal level. So it wasn't a work relationship, it was more of a friendship, which then kind of drew me into the involvement with the unit. Because I still had my hat on as a Marine, and I was looking at things through the Marine's way. And I had never really looked at it through a spouse way. So she kind of taught me, yes, you'll always be a Marine, but you're a spouse. Some people want to say that it's not very hard when they retire. I beg to differ. It was a little hard for me after going 21 years in the Marine Corps to very next day not putting on a uniform, but my husband still was wearing a uniform. So in some ways I feel like I haven't left the Marine Corps. In other ways, I think that it's definitely helped me transition. My experience as an entrepreneur have been different at every state that we've lived in. The biggest thing, if you have your own business, is you have to understand what the rules, the laws are. Being a cake artist, it's kind of like being a teacher, being a realtor. You have to get recertified at the next place that you go to. So that's been a challenge, but again, having your own business, that's what you got to do. And the clientele that you build up at one place, you hate to leave, because I had a very good clientele in California because we were there for a few years. So moving across the coast to the East Coast, I was wondering how my business would be. I knew that the first 6 months, getting things set up, taking care of the family, was going to be my first priority. But then, of course, the next thing that you think about is, all right, my business. So you have to start from the ground up again once you move. But I think that no matter what, it takes time to build up your portfolio or your clientele. And the good thing about it was, again, the Marine Corps was small. So there's a lot of people on the West Coast that knew what I was doing, knew my work, and therefore told their friends in the East Coast. So when I started my business up again, it did not take very long at all for me to get clients, because word of mouth, and they've seen my work, and it built up quickly. I was just baking for my kids, and that kind of turned into, a friend of mine, hey, can you do my son's birthday? And then another friend of mine who, I worked with on the drill field, I started doing her kids' birthday cakes, and it kind of just ballooned up from there. And that's when I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is my passion. I can do this. I can do this as a business. I can do this as my career. And I can be very passionate about it. And I feel blessed that I'm able to do that. And I just hope that spouses are able to get out of their comfort zone and do what they want to do.
Every military spouse should get to pursue their dreams and passions, but military life can be hard, and families need support, particularly those families dealing with things like food insecurity, complex medical issues, and concerns about mental health. I want to bring in my colleague Jen again. Jen, what are you hearing from families about these issues?
Thanks, Bessa. Right now, there are military families going hungry. In fact, the latest research from our friends at Military Family Advisory Network indicates that as many as 1 in 8 respondents actively serving military families who filled out MFAN's annual survey are struggling to put food on the table. That is not okay. But it's particularly troublesome given the ongoing pandemic, when we know military families are struggling with extra financial pressure. We're also hearing from families who are having a hard time getting the care they need for their special needs kids and the mental health care that they, their kids, and even their service members need, all in the middle of a pandemic. This conversation will be moderated by Patricia Keim from military.com. Patricia covers military and veterans healthcare and personnel issues and has been covering these issues and many others. Welcome, Patricia.
Welcome to everybody today to the second panel of NFMA's State of the Military Family. We'll have about 25 minutes today. I will introduce the panelists, and then we'd love to we'll go through the group and hear about a little bit about yourselves and your priorities for the coming year. I will ask some questions, and then I'm going to, we'll take some questions from the audience. We already have some coming in. So I'll kick it off now with, I'd like to start with introducing Bianca Strokowski, who lives at Patuxent River right now, and she is a Marine spouse who was the former Military Spouse of the Year. And she also, she advocates for military families and has much to say about wellness and food insecurity among military families. Then we have Shanae Simon, who is an Army spouse who has 4 children that she homeschools. And she also is, as a member of the new Leaders Council, her focus in advocacy seems to be the challenges facing women and as well as minorities as they seek leadership positions in their communities. We have Austin Carrig, who is the founder of the Youth and Children's Advocacy Network. It's hard to believe that just a few months ago in February, Austin actually testified in Congress in person, a remarkable feat, which we don't see much of right now. We have Jamie Howard, who is a Texas-based psychologist. She is listed as a resource on Military One Source, and she specializes in military lifestyles, relationships, and trauma. And finally, we have Eileen Huck, who is NMFA's resident healthcare expert. She's going to keep me in line. She is their deputy director for healthcare, and she's going to help us out today. So I'd like to start with Bianca. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and you know what you think is going to be important in the coming year.
Sure. Good afternoon. I always have the longest name in every room, so it looks like we're continuing that trend today. I have been immersed in the military lifestyle since graduating high school in my personal and professional life. I currently work for AmeriForce Media as the managing editor. We publish 22 military magazines a year, so I get to tell the stories of our military community, including OCONUS locations. I'm also the spouse of a recently retired Marine, and he currently works for the Department of Navy as a civilian. So apologies in advance to General Milley that we are a total Go Navy household here. We have 3 boys also. 2 of them are school-aged, and they're doing the virtual learning dance. And then our oldest son, Alex, who has been along for the entire military ride, must have liked it so much because he married an airman, and they are stationed at Ramstein. They got overseas orders at the very start of the pandemic.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Shanae.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, Shanae Simon, based in Memphis, Tennessee, as stated. I also wanted to take a few moments just to acknowledge Native American Heritage Month and to recognize our families identify as Native American. I am, yes, the proud Army spouse of Army Reservist Command Sergeant Major within the military intelligence realm, a homeschooling mom of 4, so homeschooling veteran. Our children range in ages 2 to 10. So it's been an exciting time to continue to homeschool in the midst of COVID. In terms of fellowships, I am a current fellow for the Urban Rural Action, and in that fellowship program, specifically focusing on food justice. So really excited to be in this space today. Our priorities for 2021 is looking at how to explore food justice and the intersection of food justice as it relates to culture, identity, food security, food insecurity, and how to make sure that our children and our communities are continuing to thrive.
Thank you. And Austin?
I am married to a soldier who's been in the Army for 18 years. We have 3 children, ages 8 to 19. All of our children, including myself, are on EFMP. So we spend a lot of our time navigating healthcare and finding new providers at new duty locations. We specifically are really involved in a grassroots movement to give voices to families like ours so that everybody who are running these programs know what our families are experiencing in day-to-day life. And so as a family, we're really looking forward to helping build the bridge for the families that are going to come after us.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Howard?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Dr. Jamie Howard, and I'm in San Antonio. I have been in the military realm for quite a while. My husband recently retired after 23 years of active duty service, and I was a therapist before we got married, and then I kind of fell in love with the military community and have had the opportunity to work for the Army and to work for the VA and to work with Humana Military TRICARE. And after all of those experiences, I definitely saw some disconnect in the mental health system, the mental health care that's being provided to our military families and service members. And so I decided that the best thing that I could do with my abilities was to open my own practice and focus on providing good care for other, military families. And so I have a practice just outside of San Antonio, Texas, called Mission Ready Counseling. And I'm really excited because it's grown quite a bit. I have 2 new clinicians that join me, and I have 2 student interns with me as well. And I focus specifically on combat trauma and military lifestyle issues. So I have like a whole group of veterans that I work with to help them work through all their stuff. And I have a whole group of spouses that I work with that help them work through their stuff, that are living with people working through their stuff. So my goal is to provide really good care to people. I'm beyond frustrated with the lack of support for mental health care in this country, but also in the military community. And I had to make a decision to either fight with big systems or just take care of the people in front of me. And so that's what I do. I focus on taking care of the people in front of me and trying to make their lives better after they've sacrificed so much for us. I feel like that's the least that we could do. One of the other things I also do is help other providers navigate TRICARE. Because I know I can't save everybody, and TRICARE is an overwhelming system sometimes. And so one of the things I do is I have a group that I help other providers that want to work with the military learn that TRICARE is not so scary as long as you understand it. So that's sort of one of my offshoots. I figure if I get more providers out there that are willing to help and understand the system better, then there's better care out there for our mental health community. And that's something that I hope in the coming year is that we continue to focus on, is improving the mental health care of our country and our service members and our military families.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. And Eileen?
Thank you, Patricia. As you said, I am part of NMFA's government relations team. I'm a deputy director, and healthcare is part of my portfolio. I'm also a military spouse of many years. My husband retired last year after a 29-year career in the Navy. So we're another Go Navy family over here. But I'm very excited to be here today and join all of you in this really important conversation about military family health and well-being. So thank you so much.
Great. Let's go ahead and kick off the questions. I'm going to start with Dr. Howard. This has been, quite a year regarding, mental health care and mental health services. Recently, during a recent forum, the DoD officials were saying that they have not really seen a huge increase in utilization of the military one-source non-medical counseling, that there was a jump a few years ago and it stayed rather steady. Can you sort of comment on what you think is going on with mental health currently this year and military families, and whether DoD actually is able to take care of all who really need mental health services in the military?
Absolutely. I think the DoD has done a wonderful job at providing programs that are trying to meet the mental health needs. I think one area where it's lacking with military one source, and also for the military family life consultants as well, the MFLACs, is that they are what you said, non-medical counseling. And the problem is our military families have big stuff going on. And so issues like trauma and medical issues, health issues, long-term things going on, those are not issues that are dealt with in a very short, solution-focused type of a therapeutic setting, like the way military one source and the MFLACs are set up currently right now. So it's kind of hard for families to utilize, because if they know they have a bigger issue, they can only be with this one person for a little bit. And once it starts to get into the territory of, oh, we need a little bit more in depth, then they have to start all over and find another provider. And nobody wants to do that. And I think that's why it's looking to be underutilized in that sense, is because there are certain limitations that are put on it that prevent people from getting probably fully the care that they actually really need. And I get that probably the goal was to be preventative, but unfortunately, our families need more than that. And so if there weren't as many constrictions with that, I think it probably would be utilized a lot more. And I can, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that I've heard a lot of families who will refer other families to like the Stephen Cohen military family and veterans clinics, and are not seeking care within the military health system. And so I'm wondering if you can comment on whether they've made DoD has made any progress in reducing stigma for seeking mental health care.
I think that they've been trying to do that, but it's still there. Service members are still afraid that it's going to affect their security clearance. They still have to answer those questions. I know even for me, because I see a lot of military people as well, that they'll ask me for my notes for my sessions for active duty service members, which I will not give them. And I say, I'll give you a treatment summary letter, but there's a lot of fear there still of how this could negatively impact their careers, their families, their security of being able to provide for their families. So it's still happening. I think there are some barriers there, especially for active duty service members, and even for some family members as well, that make it very difficult. There is a shortage of mental health providers in this country. There was before the pandemic happened. And there is a shortage of TRICARE providers in this country as well. And I know that because I worked for TRICARE before. And there are certain parts of the country that there are just not enough people for the need. And so I think that if there could be some, loosening of some constraints, which could be improved by communication. I understand that the MTFs need to understand if the service member is mission ready, which I totally get and agree with, but that can be taken care of very easily with a treatment summary letter to let them know, here's their progress, here's what we worked on, and here's their dates of service. So I feel like there are ways to get that same information and take away some more of the barriers that are still happening.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Bianca, I'd like to turn it over to you. There's some legislation in Congress right now that with a basic needs allowance for young military families who are living below the poverty line and are struggling with food insecurity. You have a very compelling story. I will say that it's interesting that the White House has, come out and said that military personnel are well paid and well compensated when compared with their peers, which I feel like the underlying message is they should budget better and they should perhaps do family planning better. So would you like to speak to that and like the crisis of food insecurity among younger military service members who might have larger families and the struggles they face?
Absolutely. First, I want to point out there is a reason why I have waited to talk about this out loud until after my husband retired. Though we know this and it's an ongoing issue, you're not going to hear these types of topics. And like Dr. Howard talked about, mental health, all those topics that have a stigma attached, we are taught from a very early onset that you don't discuss this out loud, that we believe it will impact our service members' career. So messaging there first has to change. Normalizing talking about tough topics that sometimes have shame attached to them, that has to become a priority going into 2021. As I mentioned in the beginning, my husband and I, our entire adult life has been immersed in the military. He enlisted in high school. He showed me that contract. I helped him prep for boot camp. And we embarked on our life together as a couple, starting at Camp Lejeune, where we got to live for 5 years. Well, I had a really great paying job. Then we got orders to our next duty station, and our life had been built on 2 incomes. Our bills were built on 2 incomes. And when we PCS to Yuma, Arizona, I could not find a job. We could not afford childcare costs that made sense for me to work. So I became a stay-at-home mom, and we really snowballed into serious financial debt. It became a continuous readiness issue. And we had to rely on food banks. We had to rely on payday loans that had 40% interest attached to them. And getting out of that hole is not one that is a short-term one. There was even a segment of time where we were living in Yuma and we were using MREs for dinner. These are not things that my husband as a corporal or a sergeant is going to go to his command and say are happening behind closed doors. Not only do the people who wear the uniform have pride and these alpha personalities, but though there's a large amount of programs, he's not going to ask out loud for help. It's just not something that happens. So though there's some personal responsibility in managing your finances, there's also components of this lifestyle that we know that exist that make it hard to stay above water and afford your bills and change your lifestyle every few years when you PCS. And we are one of those families, and I know there's families out there now who are in that same situation and they're fearful of saying it out loud.
Thank you so much.
Patricia, I just wanted to chime in real quick to add on to what Bianca, her story is so compelling, but I just wanted to add that the part of the issue is that because of technical bureaucratic requirements, military families frequently can't qualify for assistance such as SNAP, supplemental nutrition assistance. And so that is part of the cause behind the legislation you referred to earlier that would provide an extra allowance for families whose incomes fall below 130% of the federal poverty line. So that, families who find themselves in those kind of situations can put food on the table.
Thank you, Eileen. Sharene, I know this is an issue that's also dear to your heart. If you'd like to comment on it, and also could you touch on the DoD this year has had instituted several policies designed to improve diversity across the services and also get rid of perhaps what might be institutional racism. Can you sort of talk about, number one, food insecurity with military families, and number two, how through the pandemic, military families have been dealing with the increase in awareness about diversity issues and the importance of having opportunities for minorities and for women?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Patricia. No, I totally agree with what previous panels have said in terms about the food. It's an issue. And when you think about the poverty line, it's not just service members that are below the poverty line. Most of the Americans are below the poverty line when it comes to food insecurity. And this issue is a massive issue, and really sadly how it impacts military families and service members as they are giving up their service to protect our freedoms and our rights. And so along with that, I think in terms of there just being, continued strives and around legislation to increase this basic needs allowance is remarkable, and how we can continue to support that and advocate for that, I think is imperative. I think, again, to what Bianca said in terms of pride, removing that stigma, right, that we all have a need at some point in time, and we should be able to have that need to be addressed. Also, I know that most of the panelists are active duty spouses, but even it's impacting the reservist family as well. The reservist family is having the military responsibility and income as well as an additional income. And, if their civilian jobs have not been impacted right now in the midst of COVID, but they too are having the same challenges. And probably sometimes even more so in this pandemic, being that, they are not drilling, on a regular basis, and, funding has changed, and they are relying on their careers in terms of on the outside, and then kind of some of them have been laid off because of COVID. So even for that community, it's continued to be an issue and a compounded issue. And so I just want to acknowledge that community as well, the reservist community. And then to your second question, Patricia, in terms of inclusion and equity, I think there has been a tremendous work. I think now just even saying the words and even identifying that we have very dynamic organizations in military is probably one of the most diverse, structured organizations in the country. But how do we really begin to celebrate and identify those differences, and also begin to call out, like, what are the current numbers and statistics when it comes to people of color, when it comes to gender and gender equity? How do we continue to promote that? I think there's been great strides, but I think there's still great work to do. I think having these kind of cultural sensitivity workshops, being on these panels and having this topic to even come up as conversation is very important. So I'm thankful to have that space here. I know specifically within my husband's realm, within the MERC, that they have been very intentional about making this part of their regular training, also acknowledging different cultural months, just to bring awareness. A lot of our military families are not even aware, even though we've been afforded the benefit of living in multiple spaces, both CONUS and OCONUS. I don't know that we talk about it enough. And so I would really encourage or even challenge organizations like NMFA and other military-affiliated organizations to continue having those conversations, to develop toolkits, to develop forums to talk about the issue. Because I think sometimes, again, with the military, the component, sometimes it can be so politically, driven. We should say, we shouldn't say, we don't know the right words to say. So I think having more of these conversations, having resources available that are allowing these conversations to happen, because our world will continue to be diversified from a variety of perspectives. ethnicities or places of origin, nationality, etc. And it's something that can't be ignored. There's been lots of civil unrest this year, and I'm glad, again, that conversations are happening. But I think there's a true opportunity within the military community to have more in-depth conversations, because our communities are living in different spaces and have an opportunity to really have those levels of conversations, and also the level of experience and perspective to bring to the table as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Austin one question, and then we're going to go to audience questions. Austin, you have a lot of experience with EFMP, that program, and with the children. And a few years back, there was an effort to try to make it a lot easier for especially medically fragile children and people with that had EFMP, to make it easier to transfer benefits from state to state. I'm not really sure where that ever ended up, but what are the priorities for EFMP families, and what do you see the needs are heading into 2021?
I think our priorities are always going to be access to great medical care, no matter where we're stationed in the world. I know that going into 2021, there's a lot of reform happening within our military treatment facilities and how families are being moved around. There are going to be changes to the TRICARE contracts, which is going to affect how our families are receiving care. The NDAA for the year has the Echo Improvement Act, which is a really big piece for some of our EFMP families, providing additional respite care, potentially providing vehicle modifications for children who need it. So that we're really looking forward to in 2021. I know that a lot of our families would really appreciate a pediatric medical necessity benefit within the TRICARE realm, because there are a lot of times where our little people don't fit into the kind of blocks that are built into the TRICARE program, which is based off of Medicare, which is not for children. And so I think that when we look at our families moving around the world, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the ability to get medical care within the TRICARE standard of 28 days. And we want to know that we can move and it can be seamless.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to read some questions from the audience. I'll start with a quick one for Eileen. Laura Oswald is asking, what is happening with TRICARE and raising the age limit for TRICARE young adult, getting rid of that and raising it to 26?
That's a great question, because the premiums for the TRICARE Young Adult program are increasing quite a bit for 2021, to the point where it's going to become financially unsustainable for a lot of families. So we're pushing to eliminate that program and allow young adult dependents up to the age of 26 to remain covered under the basic TRICARE benefit, which is the case for every other employer-based plan under the Affordable Care Act. Legislation to that effect was introduced this year. It didn't go anywhere, unfortunately, but we're going to keep on pushing for it. It's one of our priorities for this next Congress.
Thank you so much. Dr. Howard, I have two variations on a question for, we've got Heather Eberhardt, who's asking, could you speak on the importance of self-care as a military wife? And on that same note is, how can military families look after their own mental health?
I think that's a great question. I always kind of say, and I can say this amongst everybody here, is that as military spouses, I think we're a little bit tougher than the average spouse, just civilian spouse, compared to some of our peers, because of the things that we have to go through. Having babies alone, the car breaks down, the lawnmower breaks, all of these things, we're very, very self-sufficient. And as a result of having to be that way in order to support our service member and take care of our family, sometimes we don't take care of ourselves very well, because we are used to being the one who has to take care of everyone else. But the important thing about that is that if we don't have someone in our own support system that helps us get through these things, we are no good to our family. And then our service member may be deployed somewhere and worried about us as well. And so it's really, really important. I find, like, I don't think I would have survived, honestly, if I didn't have a good tribe of other military spouses around me that supported me while my spouse was away. And it is not easy to, have to run a household and to be a parent who's doing everything by themselves while the other person is halfway across the world. And so I think it's really important. I think what's really hard is that we don't take the time to do that. And we really need to spend more emphasis and realize it's just like they say on the airplane, right? Put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can help other people. And that's what we have to remember as military spouses, is that we all need our support system. And every time you move, you got to develop a new one. And there's going to be friends you'll have all over the world. And that's also a great thing about it, is because no matter where you end up, you're probably going to be near somebody who is part of your support system from the past.
I think we definitely can all agree that military spouses are some of the best, strongest people, and that's the way to get through it, is with our own tribe of military spouses, right? Just a couple more questions before we wrap this up. Dr. Howard, the group that you have, is that a Facebook group for providers that to connect them and how they get involved in TRICARE?
Yes, it is called Navigating the Military Healthcare System for Providers. And I kind of encompassed it in that because the VA has different healthcare programs as well. But a lot of what we talk about is TRICARE stuff and becoming credentialed with them in the process. And a lot of what I do in that group is help educate them there's TRICARE policy manuals that people don't always know. There are a lot of rules and regulations. There's been a lot of talk about how excited they are to utilize telemental health. But that policy has been in place since 2003, and most people didn't know it. MTFs didn't know it. So that's kind of what we do in that group. So yes, it's on Facebook, and it's Navigating Military Healthcare.
Great. And I think I'm sort of getting the message that we need to wrap it up, which is just so disappointed. We could spend all afternoon here. Bessa, is there anything else that we'd like to touch on before we let everybody go?
I would sit here and have this conversation all day, but I see the cues, and I know that we do need to wrap it up.
Eileen, was anything else you'd like to add about what we should be on the lookout next year for legislation and assistance for military families?
So we're going to keep on pushing to try and keep costs low and make sure that military families have access to great health care. As Austin mentioned, there's going to be a new TRICARE contract. And so some of those details are going to change, and we're just going to keep an eye open and see what happens.
Great. Bianca, will you be working on that legislation and my mind's just drawn a blank, the basic needs allowance? Do you think that will come back up?
I would like to, work the next few months to make sure, one, that military families even are identifying with the phrase food insecurity. I think that might help bring more testimonials to the groups who are working to get that legislation passed. I would also urge our elected leaders to not let that be a partisan issue. Because people are hungry now, and we shouldn't have people deployed and worrying about what their families are, if their families are taken care of back home.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Well, it looks like time is up, and I really want to thank Eileen, Dr. Howard, Bianca, Sharene, and Austin for joining us today. Please, if you're not a member of NMFA and these issues are important to you, sign up, because it's a great organization that really supports military families. So thank you very much for joining us all today.
Thank you all. And I want to go back to something that Bianca said, which is normalize talking about hard topics. This is so important. We don't always want to talk about those things, but when we do, and when we're really honest about our experiences, we can work together to fix the problem. So don't keep those experiences to yourself. Share them with your tribe and share them with us. NMFA is here to help. Now, we've heard from military families from all different ranks and services, but we haven't yet heard from the Coast Guard. NMFA represents all of the uniformed services, and I am delighted to welcome Amy Vanderheyden, Ombudsman at Large and spouse of Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, Jason Vanderheyden. Amy?
Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Vanderheyden, and I'm the spouse of the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard. November is month of the military families, and I just want to say thank you to everyone out there, to all of our military services and their families. This has been an exceptional year. We've endured much. In the Coast Guard particularly, we have probably the same issues with a lack or reduced childcare, and our spouses have had to be creative with work and problem solving, and it takes that family network to do that. And on top of all that, we've had a record number of hurricanes and fires. Our spouses are in very remote locations, and they learn to adapt, overcome, and do that together as families and the bigger Coast Guard family. I just want to say thank you once again to everyone. It takes all of us.
NMFA is always asking, what about the family? It motivates our advocacy. It defines our programs, and it's central to everything we do. But we couldn't do it without partners who share those values. And I'm especially talking about our 50th anniversary sponsor, Pentagon Federal Credit Union. Here to say a few words is someone who knows the value of service and how important every family is to our military and to our country. PenFed CEO and military family champion, James Skank. Hi, James.
Hi, Bessa, and thank you for including me today. And good afternoon, everyone, especially to all of military spouses and all those within the veteran support organizations who support our military each and every day. You are what make America great. And I'm really delighted to join Bessa and the NMFA team to honor the service and sacrifice of our nation's military families. I'm not only the president and CEO of PenFed, I'm a member of a military family myself, and truly a personal and professional proud supporter of the National Military Family Association. Because I know how important military families are to the success of our nation, because I had the honor and the privilege to grow up in a military family. My dad was a Marine. He was wounded in combat fighting for his nation in Korea many years ago. And he taught me the importance of service, selflessness, and always answering the call of duty. As a result, I attended West Point and had the privilege to serve my nation as an officer in the aviation field, flying Black Hawk helicopters. And I later came back to teach economics and finance at West Point. I was so proud to impart in these young cadets some life lessons that would serve them well, what they could expect when they became officers and led other men and women into combat. After my military service, I wanted to continue serving this community that serves our nation without hesitation. PenFed was the perfect fit. PenFed was built on a single mission, helping our members do better financially. And like NMFA, PenFed's core members are truly our military families stationed across the United States and deployed around the world. At PenFed, we work very hard to create the same culture I was used to living in within the military, a culture of kindness, respect, integrity, collaboration, and service. When men and women work together for a common goal and they look out for one another, anything and everything is possible. Those values inspire PenFed to support military families through our partnership with the NMFA. And PenFed is very proud that we've supported the NMFA for over 30 years. And as Bessa said, we were honored to serve as NMFA's 50th anniversary sponsor. But it's not about the past, it's about the future. And as NMFA starts its 51st year under the leadership of Ash, Bessa, and the entire NMFA team, and all the great Americans that are leading NMFA forward, we're going to be there for them each and every day because our nation's military deserves the best, and NMFA always has their back. Today, we've heard from military families about the joys of military life, but also the challenges they're facing. This has been a really tough year, record deployments, a lot of hardships, kids at home not going to school. We're here to partner with NMFA to make a difference, working hard to meet these military families' needs. We want all Americans and all military families to do better financially, and we're going to continue to work together with NMFA to do that. In 2021, I've been encouraging NMFA to partner with PenFed as we look at launching family finance nights across our nation. Just think about it. NMFA and PenFed leading the charge to reach 1 million families with resources and skills they need to succeed. NMFA is the perfect partner with PenFed because we are both committed to making a positive impact on the military families' lives, not just on sunny days, but on rainy days every day. 365 days a year, 7 days a week, NMFA and PenFed stand together. In life, when you're partnered with the right people, anything and everything is possible. Thanks for having me today. Thanks for being part of this. And thanks for what you do on behalf of a very proud nation. Back to you, Bessa.
Thank you, James. We are very excited to move forward with you in this partnership in year 51, 52, and beyond. It's an absolute privilege to serve military families alongside you.
Thank
now
you.
We're going to get into a couple more speakers, two American heroes, one who needs no introduction. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and the other you may have seen in the news recently. She threw pandemic precautions to the side to save the life of a veteran at Arlington National Cemetery on Veterans Day. It's not every day you see a military spouse performing CPR, let alone Holly Ann Milley, but that is one of the things that we know to be true at NMFA. Every military spouse is more than a spouse. Join me in welcoming our keynote speakers today, General and Mrs. Milley.
I'm General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with my spouse, Holly Ann. We would like to congratulate and thank the National Military Family Association for their 50 years of support and advocacy for our military families. We're also here to celebrate Military Family Appreciation Month and talk about the most important facet of our military members and their families. More than 2.3 million active duty, reserve, and National Guard troops serve in uniform today around the globe. And there are more than 2.7 million military family members serving beside us. It is the commitment of each family, not just our individual troops, that allows us to protect the American people. One of the great strengths of our nation is our military. And the strength of our military is our family. Our military families face unique challenges, but they demonstrate resilience and inner strength that is unique in today's world. I know that in my family, our strength certainly comes from Holly Ann and our two children.
As a military family for more than 35 years, we are so grateful for support from organizations like the National Military Family Association. For 50 years, the men and women of NMFA have shown that they are united in support of those who put our nation first and have worked to honor and recognize the sacrifices of military families. Thank you again for all that you do for our military families.
Our military families have overcome significant obstacles this year. Along with the normal challenges of frequently moving across the United States or overseas, the global pandemic has added levels of strain on military families unlike any time in our recent history. Virtual schooling for children has been a challenge for many families, and social distancing requirements have affected support systems for those in need of extra help. Caregivers of our wounded veterans and families with deployed service members are also adapting to new conditions, while employment challenges have impacted many, including our military spouses.
Through it all, organizations like NMFA have helped our military families find the answers and support they need through programs like Operation Purple, a virtual summer camp for military children. I had the chance to see Operation Purple in action when children went on an exploration with the Montana Natural History Center and a tour of a real NHL locker room. Overall, more than 1,800 families from across the globe participated. In addition, NMFA provided financial support to military spouses through their Military Spouse Scholarship and Employment Program, which has awarded more than $6.8 million in funding to 6,800 military spouses since 2004. This initiative has helped many overcome the unique obstacles military spouses face when pursuing their own education and career goals. As a military spouse who has worked for more than 33 years with 14 jobs in 9 states, I'm so grateful for the work that is being done to support our military spouses.
I often hear military members say that they joined because they wanted to fly or sail around the world, or simply for the mission. But they stayed because of the people. because of the military community. The pandemic has absolutely made being a service member and military family member much more challenging. It has made our normally connected community less visible, feel less close. But our military community is very much alive, and you are surrounded by people who face similar circumstances. So be there for each other. Take advantage of today's technology to reach out and connect. Your courage and compassion will make a difference in someone else's life.
Our experiences have shown us time and again that our military families continue to be resilient and adaptable. And I know that holds true today. Keep supporting one another. In addition to connecting with your military community, we also want to emphasize the importance of reflection, self-awareness, and seeking help. You are never alone.
We would like to thank NMFA for putting on this virtual conference. For 50 years, you have advocated for military families, and we are moved by your commitment to improve mental, emotional, physical, and financial health. As we all know, family readiness is really military readiness. When our families have a high quality of life and know their needs are met, our service members are free to focus on the mission to secure our great nation. Right now, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen are forward deployed around the world, many of them in harm's way, and many of them are your family members.
Thank you again to NMFA for continuing to support our service members, their spouses, and their children. And thank you to all of our military families across the globe for continuing to say yes to this challenging yet rewarding military lifestyle.
Each of you is an example of patriotism, love of country, and selfless service. Holly Ann and I want to thank you. Together, we are much stronger.
She's a longtime champion of NMFA and has led us through transitions and growth. We're very grateful to have her on our leadership team and for the direction that she has given us over the years. Tina?
Together, we're stronger. That's the unifying thread we've heard from everyone who has joined us here today, from military families all the way up the chain of command to the leaders in our community. It's a message I'm delighted to hear. I'm Tina Jonas, Chairman of the Board of Governors at the National Military Family Association. At NMFA, we are on a mission to stand up for, support, and enhance the quality of life for every military family. And we believe serving and supporting military families makes our country stronger. We do that better when we do it together. That's the message we want you to take away from today. That's our call to action going forward. Today, we've heard from military families facing real challenges, getting jobs, finding childcare, maintaining careers, and putting food on the table. But we've also heard successes, finding your own path in the middle of military life, overcoming the odds, and pursuing dream jobs and successful careers. We've heard from the leaders committed to our families and their families, the future of our military and our nation. We are grateful for everyone who joined us today, our leaders, their spouses, and our incredible military family supporters. On behalf of the entire board and our team at NMFA, we hope you'll join us on our path forward as we work to ensure that every family is empowered, resilient, and thriving. We can do it together. Together we're stronger. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you everyone who joined us here today. We could not do this important work without you. I want to give some more special thanks. Thank you again to Pentagon Federal Credit Union, our 50th anniversary sponsor. Thank you, Wounded Warrior Project, for making Operation Purple possible. Thank you, Fisher House, for supporting our scholarship program. Boeing, thank you for supporting our efforts in the spouse licensure and certification field. Prudential, thank you for supporting our scholarship program. USAA, thank you so much for your widespread support. Geico Military, Raytheon, Delta Dental, thank you all so much for supporting military families today and throughout the years. We appreciate appreciate all of you who joined us today for the State of the Military Family. Like General Milley said, together we are much stronger. Have a great rest of your afternoon.